You are about to enjoy a production of the Ella Wellness Network. This is Wellness Fixes the Pod. I'm your host, Dr. Kelsey Vick, and we are about to get hotter and smarter in 5. Let's get into it. There was a time where I got super obsessive over my resting heart rate in college and the effect that alcohol had on my resting heart rate, to where I actually stopped drinking alcohol for a period of time because I didn't like that it elevated my resting heart rate. So let's get hotter and smarter in 5 as we chat about the relationship between our cardiovascular health and alcohol. So as a little bit of a backstory, your resting heart rate is a measurement of your health. The lower your resting heart rate in general, the healthier your cardiovascular system. Your resting heart rate is your heart rate at complete rest, and it's oftentimes found in the middle of the night when your body is completely relaxed. So the idea is that it is more efficient. Your heart is more efficient at a lower heart rate in order to pump the same amount of blood and the same amount of nutrients to your body. So again, this is a generalization. There are certain conditions where you could have a lower resting heart rate for something like an arrhythmia or a heart rate irregularity, but in general, a lower resting heart rate is a sign of a healthier cardiovascular system. So in college, I started noticing that after I would drink even a cocktail or a glass of wine, that my resting heart rate the next few days would be elevated. And I hated thinking that I was affecting my resting heart rate in that way and my cardiovascular health in that way. And so let's dive into how alcohol actually affects our physiology and our neurological symptoms in order to raise our resting heart rate and why that actually happens. So it's a multifactorial approach. So first of all, alcohol stimulates our sympathetic nervous system, which is part of that autonomic nervous system, and the balance between that parasympathetic rest digest part of our nervous system and that sympathetic fight or flight part of our nervous system. So alcohol stimulates that sympathetic part of our nervous system, which helps to increase our heart rate. In turn, it also depresses that parasympathetic part of our nervous system, or that vagus nerve, which helps to lower our heart rate. So it's working sort of in opposition of each other, and the result is an increase in our heart rate. From a vasculature perspective, alcohol also stimulates vasodilation. So if you think about our blood vessels, they can change in size, and so they can constrict, and if the same amount of fluid is going through a smaller blood vessel, the blood pressure increases, like the pressure within the system increases. If you vasodilate, same amount of fluid going through, that pressure decreases. Think about a hose, like a water hose. If you widen it, that pressure through the hose is going to decrease. Or if you constrict that hose, same amount of water going through, that pressure is going to increase. The same thing happens within our blood vessels. So alcohol stimulates vasodilation, which our body senses as a decrease in blood pressure. So because of the decrease in blood pressure, in order to maintain the same amount of fluid pumping to our body, our heart is going to increase its pumping rate in order to send that same amount of fluid, that same amount of nutrients to the rest of the body. So it senses that decrease in blood pressure, which in turn increases our heart rate. Alcohol is also diuretic. So with the fluid loss, our heart rate is going to increase again to send more of that fluid and more of those nutrients and oxygen to different parts of our body. And then lastly, sleep. Alcohol actually impairs deep sleep, which can increase our cortisol possibly, which can also in turn increase our resting heart rate. So again, it's a multifactorial approach, which is why oftentimes one glass of alcohol in some way can increase our heart rate in the short term. It's that next night, like the next morning when I wake up, I notice like a 5 to 10 beats per minute increase in my resting heart rate, which again in college, I just did not like to see on my fitness tracker. So now I actually have a better balance of it where I'm like, okay, I'm going to have a drink with friends. It's going to be okay. My body's going to recover. But I do try and be more purposeful about when I consume alcohol. So if I feel sick, if my recovery's poor, if my health overall has been like just because of stress level or poor sleep or whatever, if it's been a little shaky over the last few days, I might choose to drink a non-alcoholic drink instead of an alcoholic drink, knowing that the alcohol is going to affect my cardiovascular health negatively. But on the flip side, if my body is in a healthy state, my recovery's been well, I'm sleeping really well, I'm in a good part of my menstrual cycle where I know that my body can recover, I might choose to have that alcoholic drink because I love a cocktail, I love a glass of wine. And I know that my body will recover from that increase in its resting heart rate and that sort of momentary negative impact it has on the cardiovascular system. But again, that's just a general rule of thumb. Like over my birthday trip, I had poor sleep, I was in altitude, I was exercising, everyday skiing. I still had alcohol and it was also okay. But now I have a better mindset about it, a better balance about it. But that is the science behind why alcohol increases our resting heart rate. So now we are all a little hotter and smarter in 5 minutes now that we know the relationship between alcohol and our cardiovascular system.